We are coming together for Thursday of week 7. And if I could tell you guys on Zoom, we've got 31 people on Zoom and approximately 15 in the room, which I'd say maybe 20, but I don't think so. I was like, I'll go cross-eyed if I try to count too hard. But the fact is, if you're not here, you won't hear this. But if you are here, round of applause, because you are here on a day that's very clearly hard because we actually have this big classroom and there's only 3 people on one side of the class that I think is designed to fit 50 or more. So I definitely feel it in the air. I reflected on that last time that this is a time of the year where I'm like, gosh, well, I regret not having done some like asynchronous thing next week or like just done something for the sake of doing it. Will I regret that, or would we maybe all be okay with taking a week to put that energy towards other things? As I sit here, I think the week already started, which I'm okay with because we are recording. And if you're not here in person this time, I do hope that the next time we all have a chance to come together, you will be here. And then if you're here in the room, thank you extra for making it not echo so much in here. The acoustics when it's empty, it's even more. But for that reason, we're just going to jump in past attendance. We will resume the attendance the next time we come together, which will be on Zoom, which is nice that it takes it for us so we can just jump in. But I do, before we do that, want to pause and see if there's any announcements for the good of the group. Anything cool on campus? Any spring break? Where I went to school, sometimes they do service activities during spring break. Go ahead. Yeah, has anyone else had an empty class this week? Yeah, I don't be like I usually get a couple more butts in the seats, but yeah, do you guys feel it? Yeah. If you're here, it is a small victory. So I hope you take it. If you're here on Zoom though, that too is a victory. And actually, if I could say that I did break my streak today. If you're joining on Zoom, you missed me scootering in. I I'm waging war on UC Merced parking. But also it was fun. I was like, that was much better energy to come into class on instead of fucking goddamn parking. I just came in on my scooter. I was ready. But we actually are under review. Our program, sociology, is a new baby. We're a baby campus and we're a baby program. And so we are under this cool review right now where they're hopefully going to tell us what we're doing really well, but also where we can improve. And we actually talked at length about Zoom participation and how there is sometimes like pressure against Zoom being an option anymore. And I've told you guys before how I feel about it. And actually, I feel like right now, this is one of those times where my point is kind of being made that even though we have a room that probably feels a lot like all the other empty rooms you may have sat in class wise, most, if not all of those other rooms did not have the Zoom right now. We did not have the benefit of the 30 some odd students joining virtually, nor will we be able to record and things like that. So I think this kind of stuff is worth it. And yeah, if you didn't cash that in today and you're here in person, don't forget, we always have the Zoom. And next time when we come together, we will all be on Zoom. So you guys will see notes to that effect, but in the same regard, like, honestly, I'm probably going to be Zooming from my house. But it's just a week where, like, for me, it makes more sense to do so remotely. Go ahead. Yes. No, no, not next week. We're gone next week. The next time we come back together, we'll be on Zoom. It's on the syllabus, not here in the room. You can come to the room if you would like. Just, no, 2 classes. If you look at the syllabus, we have 2 sessions on the week before spring break. Traditionally, I cancel class the Thursday before spring break so people can have that for travel because we kind of are having a second spring break of our own, at least in Social 131. We will still meet for content, but it'll be virtually. The week of March 17th, we will meet virtually during our sessions, the 18th and the 20th. But next week, there's no expectations from content from us. If you have to take that time to finish your essay, that would probably be the best use of your time. But if you have your essay turned in, take a time off and don't look back. Come back the week after. And if you have any cool announcements, though, in the interim, I absolutely would keep posting those. And today, I'm going to have a little bit of our. Am I screen sharing? Not yet. Let me make sure. Don't worry, Zoom. You haven't missed anything good yet. But where is. Let's see here. We are recording. Screen share. I'm like, here I'm bragging on Zoom and I'm like, they can't see nothing. You didn't see anything, I promise, or at least just my normal agenda sign. All righty. Check in, make sure there's nothing on chat. But yeah, I don't know. Hopefully things like this will be easier. I actually learned there's only 2 teachers on campus that can teach remotely. That's how hard the UC system makes it to teach remotely as a extended fashion. But did you know that technically any UC class can be up to 28% remote instruction and still qualify as an in-person class? These are the minutiae you learn when you come up as a COVID professor. But yes, we will be taking that when we come back around. Now that's enough shop talk, unless we've got any other thoughts or announcements. What we will start, even though we have very small peoples in the room, I do want today to be primarily discussion and then lecture. So if you're on Zoom, there are going to be a much better breakout activity. Last time was a little scattered, but you guys did still rise to the occasion, and you may have noticed 2 announcements. The questions we came up with that I'll be sitting on and seeing where I can fit in going forward, I posted this morning. And there's also a chance to come in for office hours today in person from 2 to 3 p.m. I will kind of start them here as I normally do, but then you'll give me a little time to get over to my office. But yeah, feel free to stop in. I will also offer a Zoom link then if it's easier to come in virtually. Yeah, that is it, I think. Now, this week's readings, we are looking at the phenomenon of poverty above the unit of the individual, which isn't to say we won't continue and kind of go back to considering personal decisions and things like that. But much like other weeks, we are trying to problematize what is actually a very sometimes even American or capitalist ethos to kind of put everything down to the individual, down to the level of the individual, to assume that we are all atomistic or atoms, just individual actors who move autonomously as we see fit. Now, obviously, you hope to have agency and to make your own choices and to feel free to do so, but none of us start without some scripts and some context, right? The social animals that we are. Now, if we were looking at poverty as a function of social processes or choices above and beyond the individual, some actually push back on us talking about poverty in the United States, just because in some ways, if we look at it as a absolute sense, compared to many other less developed nations, even the most poor American lives with access to resources and a base living standard that is unparalleled in countries across the world. Now, that being said, obviously you're in this class because you care about it as something that is interesting, not just as an absolute measure, but in the discussion of poverty over time, there has been this kind of nuancing of, do we consider poverty simply to be if you make this much or below, that's it. We're going to set a line in the stand. It's a very clear reflection, more or less. Now, obviously, we have things like the federal poverty line. We do set metrics and assess social programs and eligibility accordingly. But in most instances, we're actually studying poverty as a relative phenomenon, something that is inherently based on the fact that some have and some do not. And you can really see this kind of sea change, both in sociological research, but also just American policy in the 1960s with the quote unquote war on poverty. Now, many attribute The Other America, Poverty in the United States by Michael Harrington, published in 1962, as being the book that actually spawned the war on poverty. Now, in some ways, I think it's probably a little better than the war on drugs was. In many ways, it was inspired directly because this book made it all the way to the desk of John F. Kennedy. JFK, known for many relatively, I'd say, revolutionary perspectives at his time and in his office, was really struck by the portrayals of Americans that he'd never seen people living in those substandard conditions than when he was in countries that weren't America. That if you know about John F. Kennedy, he comes from a very wealthy family. His entire, I'd say at least family, parents' generation, maybe going all the way back to the grandparents, they are Cape Cod wealthy. I don't want to be like the waspiest of the wasps. And in his mind, poverty was still set within an American kind of basic understanding of shelter, water, access to school, access to healthcare, etc. And when he was exposed to this book, that was very clearly not the case. And so, in many ways, one could say that all of us aspire to be someone like Michael Harrington. As a sociologist, all I could hope is, well, fuck this guy in office. I hope he reads nothing I write. But let's say most cases, you'd hope that the president read your book and felt galvanized to your call of action. Now, I'm going on a slight tangent about the current president in my head. Reel it back, lock it in. Now, when it comes to these two measures, I'm going to give you guys a chance to kind of compare and contrast and decide which seems more helpful, or in what instances would it be more appropriate. Now, if you're trying to decide, well, what do you mean? I don't really still understand the difference of absolute versus relative poverty. I think this is a quote that everyone always quotes. It comes back to, it's a metaphor, of course, but it's essentially trying to give you the, I don't know, 2-sentence pitch for why relative measures of poverty are just as important as setting an arbitrary line in the sand that's a reflection of, different calculus, whatnot. To have one bowl of rice in a society where all other people have half a bowl may well be a sign of achievement and intelligence. It may spur a person to act and to fulfill his potential. To have 5 bowls of rice in a society where the majority has a decent, balanced diet is a tragedy. Now, no offense to any of the foods he describes, it is a metaphor instead for how you can compare that. Actually, by one metric, if you had 5 bowls of rice in a society where everyone has 1 bowl or half a bowl, you're doing very well. How can you say different? You're, by an absolute measure, 4 bowls of rice or more than everyone else. You're right. That is very true. If you were to compare some of the most intense extreme poverty we see in the United States, they still, in many cases, have access to resources that are head and shoulders above those in other less developed countries, excuse me. But if you are someone who only has the bare minimum in a place where everyone has their needs met, now, or let's say you have 5 times the bare minimum, you're still obviously at a very intense relative disadvantage. And one could say that most of the outcomes, the negative experiences that come from American poverty, aren't necessarily a reflection of some kind of absolute standard of living or absolute deficit quantified accordingly. It is actually this relative experience that produces a great majority of the inequality. And why is that, you ask? Like I said, we are going to talk about it together, but before doing so, we're going to get a chance to learn one more time from Kathy Edin. I am going to, what is it? Pause. Oh, no, we don't keep the screen recording. We want to pause the recording. Excellent. Now, before we jump into the group activity, I preface this with saying that in many ways that the other America sparked the war on poverty, and one could say that even though obviously we still have quite a bit of poverty, and by some metrics things are worse, and uh, it also looks very different in the 21st century as opposed to uh, when Kennedy was looking at it. At least if we think about it in that perspective, uh, maybe not much has changed. But I have to say that every time I've ever played this before, I've never felt like it really mattered more than right now. Because if you watch the news, like the things that are being discussed, Medicaid, food stamps, one could say they've been in the crosshairs. They're one of the first things people point to is we need to get rid of this. It's no good. And I would say that this is the only time I've ever felt where we could in some way be experiencing those changes. I don't know. Hopefully, it's not something that can be unilaterally impacted, but I think it's important to understand why things like Medicaid and food stamps exist above and beyond, I think, the reasons we know firsthand, probably having experienced them personally or through family members. But she said something, and that's why I had to Google it, that when we look at the extreme poverty experienced in the United States, which is the metric as determined, just to fast forward for a second, the kind of global measure of extreme poverty has been defined as cash income of no more than $2 per person per day for a month or calendar quarter. Now, this is the same kind of extreme poverty. That's how they would call it in anywhere in the world. And in America, that is a case. There are people who live in that scenario, but they have access to certain social safety nets that at minimum, while they do not have cash or other resources, they do have access to, granted, I was like, as someone who's a Indian Health Services baby, clinics leave something to be desired, but you can still go there for doctor help, dentist care. Food stamps are something that was expanded since COVID. There are a great many number of people who now are on food stamps, whereas previously you had to have children, you had to have dependents, and now there are people who are able to like actually nourish themselves because they wouldn't have been able to, and they weren't eligible for any kind of social programming up until that kind of change. And these were all directly a response to not only Kennedy, but as we know, he did not get to do everything he wanted to in office, but by all accounts, Johnson really was compelled to finish the things that he was committed to. And so the Food Stamp Act of 1964 established the food stamp program in the United States. It was signed by President Lyndon Johnson, and the Medicaid Act was part of the Social Security Amendments of 1965, which established Medicare. Uh, Now, one of the only things that we can actually say we almost have eradicated since the war on poverty was the poverty amongst our elderly population. A huge part of The Other America actually portrays the boarding houses and where they would have maybe 20, 30 people living in some kind of apartment, single room style, where there's like one bathroom for 10 people on a floor. It's like college, but way worse. I There was nothing like Social Security. There was nothing like Medicare. And so if you didn't have family to live with and you could no longer earn through your physical labor, you were living destitute in essentially slums, and people were dying, obviously, from that. And so there's very few instances, I think, where we can see like, oh, we did this. We ended XYZ. In fact, we usually throw a lot of money at stuff and it's hard to prove we did anything about it. But in many respects, Medicaid, the Social Security amendments, all of these programs together almost virtually eradicated the extreme elder poverty that had been experienced in the United States since the Great Depression. So, you know, it's kind of interesting now that you know, the population that votes the most are age 65 and older. They are the most participatory demographic in the voting population. And so they honestly dictate a great majority of what happens on a political level because they turn out to vote. And it will be the programs they benefit from firsthand that is kind of on the first chopping block, right? Now, before we get into that, although at the same time, I hope you guys bring some of what's happening in the real world to bear, because I do think these are conversations that we were going to have no matter what, but depending on where your ear is to the ground, they are connected to a lot of what's being discussed right now. Now, in your small groups, we're going to go ahead. I will give you help grouping up in a second. We are going to essentially try and, by the end of it, maybe take a vote about what is the benefit of absolute versus relative measures. And your group will be responsible for making a pitch for whichever one you think is most useful in this enterprise. But obviously, you can talk about how it varies by culture, location, nation. So as you're making this point, I'm hoping you're kind of drawing on materials both in and outside of class. And we are going to take until about 1 o'clock to do this, and then we'll come back together. And I have a couple preliminary remarks, but I really want you guys to kind of dig your teeth into this because, you know, when we're trying to assess the effectiveness of these programs, like one could say that yes, earned income tax credit's been helpful and effective. But one of the questions last time was, you know, to what extent are some of these programs almost like penalizing the poor for being poor further? Could they even be locking them into a certain kind of pattern or cycle that, you know, if they want help, they can work this much, but if they ever work more than that, all their benefits are going to be gone and they're going to be right back to zero? Like, these are all things that I'm thinking you may have some experience on personally. So if you're on Zoom, stand by while we get the room set up. I would like you all to make a pitch for it as well. So hang tight while we get the breakout rooms going. And yeah, let's see here. I will turn on some music after we group up. So just to make it easy, you guys on this side, if you would, you'll move to this side for the group activity. And I was hoping there are going to be 3 groups because we don't have so many people in here. If you guys here would be willing to become a group, remind me of your name with the coffee cup in the 4th row. Say that again. Joshua. I knew it was a J for what it's worth. Joshua, if you would join these guys here. And then remind me, I was just saying, I know another J. Joanna, you're gonna join. Oh, remind me of your name. Lupe. Lupe, if you would let Joanna join your guys' group, we're gonna have right behind you a little quad will form. Then we'll have a quad here. And then in the very back, everyone's gonna be a group with the exception of our illustrious TF, teaching fellow. Remind me of your name in the back corner. Say that again. Marjorie, you're gonna join the very back corner on this side. And yes, we're gonna break. You guys have 12 minutes for this activity. I'm gonna post it back up, but when you come back together, I want you to make a pitch for one or the other and why. And don't forget that, you know, you don't want someone to steal your thunder, so you might want to go first. Alrighty. Go ahead, Zoom, get ready for yours. Okay. Let me get ready to put this in. Right, Zoom land. Oop, wrong one. Okay, this is the assignment for the small groups. I will be kind of circulating between the groups. So if you have questions, let me know, but in 10 minutes, you're gonna report out. And yeah, I'm hoping you guys are gonna wow me. Zoom has really been holding us down. So let's keep the pattern going and stand by for your breakout room. I can go on. All righty, I did not assign numbers this time, but we do have three groups and there's an incentive to go first. So who would like to kick us off? Essentially, you don't have to give us a rehash of everything you talked about, but you should be reporting out which of the measures are more appropriate for understanding poverty and how, why, what is your rationale? Yeah, who would like to start? Go ahead, very back. You said absolute, you said, or?
For understanding poverty, we said, relative.
Relative. Okay. How come? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe more rich and nuanced, I think they'd say. Okay. And so this one easier to quantify, more simple, but it kind of, it loses some of that. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, very much, right? Like the number on the paper, like, can only mean so much, one could say. Uh, thank you guys for that. Let me check in on Zoom. Let's see if we've got any brave answers. Okay, we do have one that, I'm gonna kick it back to the room, but, we're gonna add these to the board shortly. Who'd like to go in here? Go ahead, Joy. Okay. Wait, absolute does or doesn't? Absolute doesn't, yes, okay. Perfect. Mhm. Yes, the reality of it. All righty, one more chance for the room and then we'll kick it to Zoom. We've got some really good answers up here. Go ahead. Mhm.
So it counts for differences in cost of living. We're talking about how $2 is the same across cities.
Yes.
And it also counts for average programs, so yeah, the differences.
Mhm.
So absolutely might be good to like standardize things, but relative is better for looking at the quality of life.
Yeah. I like that. And that's hopefully we're kind of seeing in some ways. Anything to add to that before I pop off? All righty. Now one could say that it would probably be worse if we just did one or the other. That in some ways we obviously had to have both because, you know, I don't want to make a bad example, but I'm sure there's someone with plenty of money who, you know, is like, oh, yeah, I'm broke. Or, you know, shit, more money, more problems. But at the same time, one could think of just your perceptions are relative inherently, even though, right, at the end of the day, a dollar is, right, a dollar has cash value, but to the point of the group here, cost of living, right? $2 doesn't necessarily equal $2 everywhere. Ain't that the truth? Now on Zoom, I want to read out a couple of things. Now, absolute measures, we've got a pitch for absolute. Let me get some different color. See here, we got a pitch for absolute. Oh, well, then actually, yeah, no, absolute, because showcases the low income where families can't afford basic necessities rather than relative where it showcases families only having half the income of a middle class family. And I think, what is it, that there are, what is it, the difference matters. And in some ways, even if we don't know what's causing it, we have to be able to quantify it, to be able to actually say anything is happening in the first place. We don't know what we don't know. And if we don't have an absolute measure, we can't even have a relative one. I'm seeing some more pitches for a relative. I'm going to see if there's anything to add to the board. Differences in living standards too. Relative, we'd say. And maybe I'm gonna put here like culture, one could say, like how you interact with money, how you save or spend, or like even debt as a thing. Like these are all super impacted by culture, right? The things that you learn, the things you value. This is not necessarily like this doesn't come with your paycheck. It's coming from like life, right? Whereas your paycheck, obviously, you know, if you make a certain amount on paper, you might meet certain, oh, you're technically middle income or low income, et cetera. But your paycheck is not the same thing as the habitus that goes with it. Now, that's an older word. I'm gonna see, we have a couple other points here. And I want to read it out because they reflected too on the second part for extreme poverty, that its expression depends on culture and culture acts as almost a mediating factor. For example, in collectivist cultures such as India and Brazil, it's more normalized for multiple families to live in one house and share resources within a community. This might serve to cushion the effects of poverty, and poverty might mean something different in those areas. And then also that yes, so in many ways, not only is it a matter of access to resources, more people can pool more things together. But I mean, this is something I always say too, that like, you know, what is the difference between a multi-generational home and then doubling up, which is a form of homelessness, right? And obviously there are really absolute measures. It's a number of bodies in the house versus rooms in the house, access to toilets, et cetera, et cetera. Those things are obviously like that's an absolute measure. Is there enough beds for everyone to sleep in? Are there enough toilets for everyone to use the facilities? But at the same time, we know that there are places, cultures, even in America too, but around the globe, where having your grandparents live with you to the end of their life is just the way it is. You know that you will take care of your parents till they pass on. You will have their help in rearing your children. And actually, to kind of bring us full circle, that's why so much of the programs we saw come out of the war on poverty was because it is not a very American thing to automatically be taking care of your parents as they age, to automatically assume some kind of multi-generational home. America is probably the home of what? Self-storage and assisted living facilities more than anything else. When you think of things that maybe don't exist in other places in the world because they don't interact with the elder care or other responsibilities in the same way. Now I am going to thank everybody who pitched in on Zoom. I don't think I could not actually write everything that you have put on the board, but I do think it echoes a lot of what we saw here in class. And before we totally end it, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up just for a couple last points to bring this home. Now, Oh, we got a screen share. 111, everybody. Let's see here. Share. Back to this guy. All right. So as we said, we're looking at extreme poverty, and America is probably one of the only places in the world that has such a clear demographic that could be described as the quote unquote working poor. And that is in many ways that reflection of like a cultural expectation that you have to be working to be a valuable member of society, and that actually we would value your ability to clock in somewhere above and beyond any of your other identities. And that, for better or for worse, much like our kind of commitment to marriage or family formation being the end all be all for eligibility for social programming, it's kind of a similar thing of like, well, I'm glad that I have to be married and have a job to matter to society, that I have to do those things in order to have meaning or deserve to live. Just to point out, as a settler, I was like, as a Indigenous scholar, we don't have to live like that. But in the world that we live in, this means that we actually have a huge concentration of extreme poverty, particularly amongst children. And so even though we did all this work to virtually eradicate elder poverty through those programs, it in many ways just kind of put it onto families, and particularly mothers who were single mothers responsible for their entire household's resources. And so a large majority of children were actually observed to be living in households where an adult was working during the year, most primarily, and only a few of them were actually living in homes that received TANF or welfare, as it's been called. And so that idea that if you work, you'll be able to provide for your families, like the working poor, probably people we all know, have some pretty good examples of like you could work yourself into the ground and chronically not have enough to meet your needs or those of your family members. And much like their work in previous times, they really, I aspire to do this kind of work myself, that if you're going to bring things, you got to bring the heat. And so you come many different directions with that. And they actually went to places no one had ever studied these phenomena before. For example, Tennessee and the rural towns of the Mississippi Delta, rural areas largely have been left out of all considerations of poverty and inequality, or at least the ones that we use to shape policy. And so to show this phenomenon in places where we know that divide between those who work and those who don't is arguably even more palpable. Now, to close, I want to really reiterate that this is a phenomenon that impacts children first and foremost, and that much like the other things we've studied, if you could just grow up and grow out of it, it probably would be okay, I guess. But we know that's not the case at all. That by experiencing extreme poverty, you almost certainly are also experiencing simultaneously residential instability, larger housing problems, food insecurity, medical hardship, or all of the above. And so even people who do their best to leverage the programs and the work they have available to them find themselves caught in this loop, never being able to get ahead. And in some ways, people could say that's a system by design. I am a state employee who can't always say things as much as I'd like, but it's hard not to wonder, why is it that the programs that are supposed to help us are often something that almost kind of ties a hand behind your back? And if you want to do better, you're going to have to do without those things. And so how will you ever actually get ahead? I don't know, but we're going to pick this back up when we come back together. Don't forget, we have no class next week. Some of you started early, but take care of yourselves, please. The only thing you can do to stay well is to keep to yourself and sleep. That's probably really hard right now. So do whatever else you can. And we'll see you next time. Office hours start now. So if you're here on Zoom, you can stick around while we clear the room. If you're here in the room and you want to meet now, just start forming a queue. And then at 2 o'clock, there'll be ones at my office. All righty. Bye, Zoom land. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.